Hello, everyone. Thanks to Michael's question yesterday about the definition of HABA'A BEKISNIN. I decided to try to tackle it as best as possible. And Rabbi Frost, who I quoted from yesterday about matzah, his whole book about laws of brachot, published by Masorah Art Scroll, I actually saved as a PDF that whole chapter, and I'll send it as an attachment either to the WhatsApp or to the email. I'm not sure what my abilities are, but I think he actually ends with a table and explains every single possible, I think, every possible explanation. So this is the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch was the beginning of what we call the Achronim, the later generations after the expulsion from Spain. Anybody before that is called Rishonim, and before that was the Talmud and the Geonim. So that's how we define it, more or less. It's also one of the first Hebrew books to ever be printed in an actual print. You didn't have to copy it onto scrolls, so it got spread out in the Jewish world a lot faster than would have normally. So this translation is not the best because they immediately translate HABA'A BEKISNIN as dessert. So bread offered as dessert, one recites on it the blessing who creates kinds of sustenance, Barim and Mezonot, and after it a blessing embodying the three, which is the first three blessings of Birkat HaMazon, which we talked about very briefly. And if he ate from it an amount that others were accustomed to fix a meal on it, even though he was not satisfied from it, he recites on it, who takes out, which means Birkat HaMazon, Hamotzee, and grace after the meal, because it's a larger amount. That's what I said. So if somebody ate like two cakes or something like that, crazy like that, even though that's not proper meal, then that's what we do. And if he ate a amount which does not require for the washing of the hands and the motzi, then he also doesn't say Birkat Hamazon afterwards, but only Bracha Men Shalosh. So that's the quote from the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch, the way that he paskined the halacha was basically he took the three Rishonim, the Rambam, the Tur, and the Rosh or the Rif. And whenever there was a majority between like two against one, he always went according to the majority. That's his understanding of Acharei Rabim La'atot in Exodus, where it says that you must follow the majority. And so Rabbi Frost here begins a section about cake. And so HABA'A BEKISNIN, the special status of bread is due to its prominence as the mainstay of a meal. Thus, one recites Hamotzee only on breads which are suitable to be eaten with a meal. Those breads require a Hamotzee, regardless of whether or not the individual happens to be eating them as a meal. So, just maybe a quick example, I can dip a bread or a cracker into soup or into a dip, but I can definitely not take a wafer or a cookie or a piece of cake and dip it in my soup. That's absolutely ridiculous. So, accordingly, one who eats even a crumb of bread must recite Hamotzee. However, breads which are normally eaten only as a snack cannot be classified as lechem, even though they too are baked in an oven. These breads, in quotation marks, do not qualify for a Hamotzee, nor do they require either Netzilat Yadayim or Birkat Hamotzee. These breads are termed by Chazal HABA'A BEKISNIN and are the subject of our next discussion. So there's different opinions, like I said yesterday, three different definitions, but we didn't go through them. So let's see what the three definitions are. The Rishonim present us with three apparently different definitions for HABA'A BEKISNIN. First definition, pie. In the opinion of some Rishonim, HABA'A BEKISNIN is made of a dough formed into a pocket and filled with fruits, nuts, or their equivalent, for example, apple or cherry pie. Certainly, one does not eat cherry pie as a meal, nor is cherry pie eaten with the main course of a meal, i.e., with the fish or meat. Thus, it is logical to assume that cherry pie does not deserve the status of lechem. So that means even that if he just wanted the crust and not the cherry or the apple, he still doesn't have to make hamotzee on it, even though it's really dough and it's not normally sweet, very sweet dough. So we don't make on it hamotzee. We just say poskim rule that even if one actually used bread dough as the crust for this pie, one recites only a mezonos. The fact that the dough in the form it was baked is unfit for a meal is decisive in defining it as HABA'A BEKISNIN. Indeed, even one who eats only the crust and partakes of none of the filling recites a mezonos. However, one who eats only the filling recites the proper bracha for the filling, whether bore pre'etz or shehakol, depending on what the filling is. So this classification of HABA'A BEKISNIN is limited by the following two conditions, one reflecting on the amount of the filling and the other on the type. The filling must be a sufficient quantity so as to significantly affect the taste of the pie, which means we talked a long time ago about what's called ikar and tafel, important and less important, or comes with it. So sometimes we're using the bread or the crust only to hold it because we don't want our hands to get dirty, but really what we're interested is the filling. So that's why it has to be a certain amount. And also the underlying principle of HABA'A BEKISNIN is that this pat is unfit to be eaten with a meal. And technically that crust can be eaten with a meal, so that's the first definition. Second definition, we'll go back to the examples later. Let's see just the second definition. Cake. Other Rishonim define HABA'A BEKISNIN as a bread kneaded with any liquid other than water, i.e. eggs, honey, or fruit juices, or breads to which a significant amount of spice or flavoring, like sugar or cocoa, was added. Such breads acquire the taste of whatever liquid or spice was added to the dough. Thus, whenever the taste is strong enough to make the bread unfit for normal bread use, the bread cannot be classified as lechem and requires only a mezonos. For example, marble cake or cupcakes. Certainly, one would not consider using marble cake for a sandwich or eating it with fish. Thus, a cake of this type is unsuitable for use as a bread and does not warrant a hamotzee. If, however, the taste of the liquid is not strong enough to significantly alter the taste of the bread, one must recite a hamotzee. And so he brings one example here, but afterwards he also talks about a different, much more problematic example. So the first example is hani challah. So hani challah is made, the dough itself is mixed with honey, but it's not more than the water is in it. The honey is just to add to its tastefulness. And so the other example, which he is very much against, and so is Rabbi Gladstein, and I'm not sure what Rabbi Melamed is, because I never asked him about airplanes, but the airplane bread that they call mezonos really is not mezonos, because that's your meal. And even though it is made with a little bit of apple juice or orange juice, you still, you start your meal with that and you put into it the vegetables or the meat or the fish that they offer you. So that's, or eggs, even more common, the breakfast on the airplane. So that's the second definition. And the third definition is crackers. So it's not sweet anymore, but it's also not eaten as a meal, right? So and it's also doesn't have any stuffing. It's just a flat cracker with different spices maybe. The third opinion holds that HABA'A BEKISNIN is a dry, thin, and brittle bread eaten primarily as a snack and not eaten with a meal. While the previous two types of HABA'A BEKISNIN are not considered bread because of their taste, this type is not regarded as bread because of its form. Although this bread is made of flour and water without almost any additives, its form makes it unsuitable for use as a bread. For example, a hard pretzel, like we talked about yesterday in the question and answer. And hard pretzels are made with flour and water only. However, since they normally are eaten merely as a snack, they require only a mezonos. And by the way, there's another thing with pretzels, which is that just like the bagel, which is hamotzee, they first parboil it in water, and then that already shows that you're not trying to use it as bread, and also the shape. So that's maybe the definition between a bagel and a pretzel. They're almost the same exact ingredients. And they're also cooked in that way, where it has to float in boiling water for, I think, 10 minutes, something like that, and then fully baked afterwards. So, but the pretzel is definitely not, if you can't come to somebody and say, that looks to me like a loaf of bread. So because of the shape. And also biscuits and crackers and kichel and breadsticks and all these examples. So let me just go to the very end where he has this table. But like I said, I'll try to upload it. Um, so here. Um, So cake, flavored dough, crackers, thin, dry, brittle bread, and pie fill the dough. So the flavoring does not affect the taste of the dough. It contains more water than fruit juice. Then the blessing is Hamotzee. Oh, I have to, I guess, scroll down, but let's just compare all. Flavoring affects taste of the dough, like honey cake, and contains more fruit juice than water, so that's the exact opposite. According to the second definition of crackers, bread is originally baked in thin, brittle form, primarily used as a snack, like crackers or hard pretzels. And bread baked in unusual form, but rebaked in present form, primarily used in place of bread. So a pita or a lafa is also very flat, and obviously they are what our ancestors ate in the desert. They definitely did not eat cracker matzah. They ate the soft matzah, and Sephardi Jews today do that all the time. Apparently, Rabbi Ritzfeld also did a couple of those attempts, and so did I. And last, the pie that's filled with dough, filling does not affect the dough's taste, like raisin challah, or filling does affect the dough's taste. So that basically sums up everything. And like you guessed, Hamotzee, Mezonos, Hamotzee, Mezonos, Mezonos. Um, so I think that that's a good summary, and even though I would have loved to use Rabbi Melamed's class, it's in Hebrew, and it's hard for me to translate as we're reading, but I will try to review it and find if I can find about the airplane bread, and we'll stop here.